Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I am Jess Tomlinson, your Radiant Self-Care Coach. And first of all, I'm in Miami. I'm so excited. I'm pretty jet lagged. I only got about 4 hours of sleep on the plane, but I took a last-minute Bliss trip. And that's actually what we're here to talk about, right? Is how I took 4 amazing Bliss trips in the last year, all while working a full-time job and starting a business. And I just have to say, I'm so excited to be here because this is actually the first webinar that I've done by myself. And so I'm a little bit nervous that you're going to get bored of just seeing me. So I'm just going to put that out there. Normally, I like to do interviews on my Her Radiance Revealed webinar series. So just bear with me. Hopefully you get some great information. I have some really awesome tips of how I've really learned how to make travel and Bliss trips a part of my lifestyle and how they've completely changed my life, you guys. So I can feel the energy building in me because it brings tears to my eyes when I think of how travel has changed my life. So that's just a little intro for you. Welcome. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself. On the side of the webinar screen, you should see a little chat box. So if you would leave your name and also where would you take a Bliss trip to if you could go anywhere in the world right now? Like where would you go? So I see Shannon has said she would go to Hawaii. Awesome. I went to Hawaii, Shannon, this past year. That was one of my Bliss trips. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. Jennifer, hi Jennifer, yay. Jennifer's coming with me to Bali soon. So part of this webinar also, you guys, is that I'm going to be sharing a little bit about how you can take a Bliss trip. And if you're ready to take a big leap into a Bliss trip, you'll know at the end of this webinar, and you'll know if you're meant to join me and some fabulous ladies in Bali at the end of April when we are going there on the Radiance Recharge, which is my women's retreat. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that at the end of this webinar. You're going to want to hang out for the very end because I'm going to leave some space for Q&A, which I know is always really awesome to be able to kind of ask your questions after you've heard all my tips, and you might be leaving this webinar like, I wish I would have known this. So I'm going to dedicate some time for Q&A. And then also at the end, I'm going to share with you how you, if you're feeling called by the end of this webinar, can take a next step to have a conversation with me about Bali. So I hope this all sounds good. I'm not seeing anybody else in the chat box besides Jennifer and Shannon. So make sure, don't be shy. Oh, good. Brecken. Hi, Brecken. What a cool name. I recently went to Ghana, Africa, and I love to go back as soon as possible. Wow. That's really cool, Brecken. Jennifer, actually, I'm just going to share a little information about her. I hope she doesn't mind, is part of Dazzle Africa, which is a really awesome nonprofit charity, and she's been to Africa as well. I can't remember what part, but you might want to hook up with Jennifer in this chat box and find out a little more about what she does. All right, so I'm just going to let you guys kind of filter in, introduce yourself, let me know where you would go. I probably wouldn't go anywhere besides being here in Miami with my amazing boyfriend who is, he lives in San Francisco, but he's here for a short amount of time working on a special project in Miami. And I just, used all of my tips that I'm going to share with you guys today, and I made it happen. And here I am. I only booked the trip a couple of days ago. My coworkers told me I was crazy, but hey, here I am. So I actually wouldn't be anywhere besides Miami right now. All right, so let's get started because we have a lot to cover today, and I'm really excited to share with you all of my tips. I have 13 tips for how you, like I have, can take your own Bliss trip, and hopefully many of them within the course of the next year. So before we dive into that, one thing that I want to do and that I feel is really important every time I lead a webinar is just to acknowledge that you showed up. So I'm a self-care coach, right? And a big part of self-care I like to say 90% of self-care and 90% of life is showing up for yourself. And just by you being here with me and the other women on this webinar, you've shown up for yourself, and that's a huge step for your self-care. So I would like you to just get really present to that, and I'm celebrating you. I would like you to celebrate yourself. And one way that we can do that is by kind of tapping in and quieting our minds through meditation. That's one of my favorite practices in my own self-care, and you can implement it as well. Even if it's just like 2 minutes a day, meditation makes a huge difference in your self-care. So I'm going to lead us through a little meditation visualization right now, just so we can really get settled in for this next hour together. Sound good? All right, so get yourself comfy wherever you are. I know my back hurts a little bit from my plane ride, so I'm just going to kind of feel into that. And place your feet on the ground, both of them if you can, or whatever position is comfortable. You know, if cross-legged on the couch or in your chair is most comfortable, do that. Nurture yourself. And then we're just going to close our eyes. And we're just going to, whatever thoughts are running through your mind, just let them go. And notice how your body feels. So many times when we come on to these webinars, or we really take a step in our self-care, there can be some crud kind of built up. And so we want to release that so that we can welcome in all of the goodness that we're going to be discussing on this call. So let's take some deep breaths together, breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And one last deep breath in, and breathing out. And let's just put our hands over our heart. Maybe your heart is beating really fast like mine. You've got a lot of energy flowing through you. And just send yourself some love. Some love for showing up today. In whatever space you're in, maybe you had a really rough week. Just know that it's okay to feel a little sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel ecstatic. Whatever emotion you're feeling, it's totally fine. And as you tap into celebrating you for showing up today, I want you to get really clear on, why did you show up for yourself on this webinar? What is that reason why you wanted to join me today to talk about Bliss trips, to talk about travel? And once you have that answer in your heart and in your mind, I want you to open your eyes when you feel ready. And let me know in the chat box, what is it that brought you here today? So I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. While you're thinking of what brought you here today and sharing in the chat box, I'm just going to give you a little overview of my own story of self-care and why the heck radiant self-care is so important to me. And I'm going to attempt to do a screen share with you guys in a minute. So I'm hoping that that works. And I'm going to ask for your feedback if you could just type in the chat box when that happens. If you can see these photos that I'm going to share with you. Great, Jennifer, to be inspired. Yay, we love inspiration, right? That's one of the reasons that I knew I was supposed to take this Bliss trip to Miami, was just to like get re-inspired. There's been so much going on for me, and maybe that's true for you guys too, to explore the world. Oh, that's so cool. That's one of my goals too, Shannon, is to just travel the world and really see every possible place on this planet that I can before I die. That's really a big goal of mine. All right, so a little bit about me. I didn't always live this radiant self-care lifestyle. Quite the contrary, actually. My story is that I grew up as what I call a yes girl. Basically, I lived to please others. I didn't even know how to say no. It wasn't in my awareness. Anything that I could do to make other people happy, that's what I would do, no matter what I was really feeling on the inside. And because of that, I lived to society's expectations of who I should be, my family, my lovers, the media. I really stepped into this role of the good girl and what I thought a good woman looked like on this planet. And that for me was important, to be that person. Unfortunately, what happened when I did this is that, and I didn't realize it at the time, but for 10 years, more than 10 years, I experienced excruciating stomach pains. So what happens when we push down all of these desires of ourselves and we kind of like put ourselves in this little box of what other people want us to be, is that that can manifest in the body. It can manifest as chronic headaches or chest infections. I also had those. Every year I would get like massive bronchitis where I would just cough and cough and cough. And this whole kind of like area of tension and storing that is really like your body saying like, what are you holding on to? What are you not releasing out into the world? How are, for me, I wasn't being my true self. And my true self is very expressive, very opinionated, and I would push all that down. So basically, I had lots of medical bills. They didn't know what was wrong with me. I would have these excruciating stomach pains that were like 1,000 knives were stabbing into my belly. And maybe some of you have experienced this too. I would be hurled over and eventually I would throw up. And this started from the time that I was in junior high all the way through my adulthood. And it's only been in the last, gosh, like 5 years that I haven't experienced those stomach pains at all. So what I want to share with you is I had no idea that I was living this lifestyle that was holding me back. I was like, self-care, what is that, right? Like I was this happy person and I thought everything was great. So my message to the world and to women is, you might think everything's okay, but until you really connect to yourself and you ask yourself these key questions, you know, like, am I truly happy? And you really dig deep, you might not have any idea. And when you discover that, like I did, you're gonna feel better than you've ever felt in your life. You're going to be this bright light of radiance. And that's really what I support women in being. So I want to show you guys a picture of me, and I'm going to try to do this screen share. So we'll see how this works. Okay. Let me know if you can see this. Basically, this was me. So I'm not sure if you guys can see this picture of me. Please let me know in the chat box, but it is me as a hot mess. I still can't believe that this is even me. I mean, my goodness, it doesn't even look like me. And when I look at this picture, it's pretty sad to look at. I'm wearing an I Survived t-shirt. What's that all about? And basically what had happened leading up to this picture is I was in the middle of what some of you might call like a perfect storm in your life, you know, like one of those big seasons in your life where so much has happened. I had just recently ended a relationship of almost 3 years when he didn't show up on the plane for Christmas to meet my family. I had had a surgery. I had a rib removed, which is a whole other story. I had quit my job, started a new job, moved, and then met somebody new. So my life was just completely up in shambles, right? It was kind of like this feeling of brokenness and like a new baby chick in the world where I was just starting to find my footing. So I'm going to see if you guys can actually see that. I'm going to go back to the chat box right now. It's up. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that was not so fun. Thank goodness now I've made some changes, you guys. I've made some huge changes for my own self-care, and I've gone from this picture of being a hot mess. And travel has been one of those ways that I've been able to achieve this lifestyle. And so now I have experienced so many amazing trips. So you can see these pictures of part of my own self-care, in addition to lots of other self-care rituals, which I've shared in other webinars. But today I'm going to focus really on travel. Has been, I went to France, I went to Italy, I've gone to Peru, and I've actually also gone to Prague this past year, which was one of my Bliss trips. And through these trips, you guys, there has been this deep transformation that has occurred in me. Something really magical happens when we take ourselves out of our everyday comfort zone and that we can get stuck in, right? If you think of like kind of just this like comfortable cocoon and everything is safe and okay. But once you begin the transformation process and you take yourself out of your usual surroundings, that's where the growth happens. That's where the opportunity to become this butterfly occurs. When you make yourself a little bit uncomfortable and you go to another country and you jump in, you're able to really discover what's important to you. And we can't do that in our everyday surroundings because life is crazy and busy, right? So that's a snapshot of some of my Bliss trips. And I'm going to show you. So basically, here's a picture of me as a little girl. So I've always loved trips and the water, and I found it so exhilarating. And what I really hope that you get from this webinar today is that vacation is different than a Bliss trip. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about like what is different about this. But for me, being able to take these Bliss trips has led to me feeling more expressed than I've ever felt, connecting to different cultures, getting out of my comfort zone, like I mentioned, indulging, experiencing these beautiful places. Just like this little girl, right? We get to tap into our little girl self of like, what do we want and what do we desire and what feels good in the moment? And there's something really special about this. And for me, I'm going to put up another picture. It represents freedom. So being on that plane at 30,000 feet in the air, I know it's kind of like maybe a mind fuck, but I literally feel high on life. And I feel literally like I'm part of the plane and I get to spread my wings and really like rediscover myself and take action steps after I come back home to implement everything that I've discovered while I'm on these trips. So what I really hope that you get is that Bliss trips specifically represent freedom for me. What do they represent for you? And maybe just type that into the chat box right now. Like, what does travel look like? What does it feel like? What do this kind of travel, a Bliss trip as I call it, what does it feel like to you? Jennifer says, wow, look at how much you're glowing now compared to the past pic. Yes, I totally am. Much different, right? So my desire for you as we dive into these 13 tips of how you can take your own Bliss trip is that you really are touched by my story of where I came from and really not feeling connected to myself and living up to other people's expectations, getting sick every year. Now, I shared this on my last webinar, I have not been sick in 3 years, knock on wood. I have not had allergies. I used to have allergies. I used to get a bronchial infection every year, like I said, and I'm just feeling more energized and more alive and more like myself. And travel, Bliss trips have been a key element in my radiant self-care to get me to this place of happiness. And that's really what Bali, the Radiance Recharge, is going to be all about for these women that are joining me on this retreat. So if you haven't already, type in the chat box, like, what does travel represent to you? What do Bliss trips? A deep breath, a life cleanse. Wow, that's awesome, Brecken. That's beautiful, a deep breath. I just want to take a deep breath when I read that. Beautiful. Okay, so let's get into this. I'm going to be sharing with you a few more photos, but I'm going to come back to the screen now. Here I am. And we're going to get into, so what is a Bliss trip? I'm gonna share with you that right now, and then we're gonna get into these 13 ways that you too can take a Bliss trip. So let's get started. What is a Bliss trip? A Bliss trip for me is two different things. It is being able to completely indulge in pleasure while you're on vacation and recharge. So pleasure and recharge. So why is this different than a normal vacation? So a lot of times when we think of vacation, we think of like family trips, right? We're going with the family, we're going on a cruise. There's a lot of go, go, go and do, and like negotiating with other people of like, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And there's just a lot going on. And vacation in general can be very stressful. So a Bliss trip specifically is pleasure first, and then recharge. Okay, so a Bliss trip is not one of those trips that you get back from and you need to take a vacation from a vacation. Do you know what I'm talking about? I know for me, I work full-time and I actually work for an airline. So this topic is very relevant if you're wondering, why the heck can you talk about travel? That is a qualification of mine. But when we get back, even as like airline employees from trips, it's like, oh God, I need a vacation from a vacation. So a Bliss trip is not that. A Bliss trip leaves you feeling so indulged and so recharged. Like Brecken said, it's like a deep breath, a deep cleansing breath. Shannon said, when I see myself on the beach of Hawaii, I see myself dancing around free and happy and refreshed. Wow, Shannon, that's so beautiful because I am a huge fan of dancing. If you guys follow me on social media, I post these crazy dancing videos. I actually just did one yesterday. I tend to do them on Fridays. Get your freak on Friday. Hashtag. But part of this Bali retreat is we are going to be dancing. We're going to be expressing ourselves, tapping into that inner feminine, like not worrying about what society thinks. Who cares, right? This is a time on a Bliss trip to completely let go. So Shannon, that is so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that you also love to dance and danced on the beach. Hello. Jennifer, getting out of my comfort zone and being present. Being present is so key, and we're going to talk about this as we go along in the tips, because one of the key elements that I found is like magic. It is absolutely what I call magic fairy dust, is being able to set this intention for like being present and what do you want to get out of this Bliss trip. And without that intention, you probably won't reap the benefits that you had hoped to reap from your vacation or your Bliss trip. So awesome, getting out of your comfort zone and being present. Very cool, Jennifer. All right, so keep those comments coming in. I see there's other attendees on this call. Everybody's just being very quiet. I see Mitzi and I see Pamela and Cindy. So ladies, feel free to chime in. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear from you and hear your amazing voices and see you speak your truth. All right, let's get into this because we're already 25 minutes in. Okay, so Bliss trip number 1 tip is before you even consider taking a Bliss trip, listen to your body. Okay, so I'm just going to keep looking at my notes over here, if you guys don't mind, so that I stay on track. So what does your body, first of all, need? What does it want, and what does it desire? So oftentimes when I get ready to take a Bliss trip, it's a result of me tapping into my inner heart, my belly, my body, and asking myself, like, what do I need right now? Do I need a break? And if that answer is yes, like I need to completely recharge, boom, that's a trigger for I need to take a Bliss trip. I need to take a trip for myself. What do I want? Like, heck, I wanted to come to Miami, and here I am. I made it happen. And then what do I desire? So desire is like that deeper longing. So for me, I desired to go to Bali. And so what did I do? I created a Bali Bliss trip, not only for myself, but for me and other amazing women who are going to be able to join me. So 8 other women. I have 4 with me right now. So there's still 4 spots remaining. So tap into that. I call this reveal. So reveal your needs, wants, and desires, and start with that emotion before you even come up with the idea of where you want to go. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is to release. Okay, release. Why is this important, and what do I mean? Release is if you get too into your head when you're thinking about taking a vacation, what happens? You're coming up with money excuses. Oh, I can't make that happen. It's too expensive. Or your like sense of worthiness maybe is not completely enough. Like you're feeling like, well, I really need, want, and desire to take this trip to Bali. But you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay if I don't. So by releasing, and what I mean by that is by you being able, one of my tips for releasing is being able to just kind of like word vomit. So that can either be journaling it out, like what are all these feelings that you're having that are blocking your ability to jump into this Bliss trip and make this happen for yourself. So journaling is a great way to just like word vomit it out and like don't hold back. Like what are all your self-doubts? What are all your fears? Just get that out. Don't judge when you're journaling, right? Like a lot of times we like want to correct and make edits. Just spew it out onto a page. Or one of my other favorite ways is to find a sister, a woman that you trust, and ask her to hold some space for you. So what that means is that she literally is just there receiving your word vomit. She's not putting up opinions. She's not making comments. She's not conversing with you. She's just listening. And you are going on and on about, oh, you know, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm not feeling worthy. It's too much money. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it happen. And what am I going to do about my dogs? And, you know, what if I can't get the time off work? So there's all this stuff that is in our head. And by releasing, what happens is we drop down into our belly. So we tap into those needs, wants, and desires through releasing so that we can take that extra step. If we don't release, we're never going to make these Bliss trips happen for ourselves, right? So like for me coming to Miami today, the ticket was $900 and my coworkers thought it was crazy, but I had tapped in so much into my heart a couple of days ago that I kept feeling that longing, that urge to be here with Harnick. I kept feeling like I wanted to be near the ocean, and I didn't question it because I was able to release and release and release. Okay, what's the bigger fears that are coming up here, and how can I get around those to actually make it happen? Okay, so that's the second tip. The third one is to rev your radiance. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Rev your radiance. What I mean is tapping in after you've released to your own inner radiance, your own fire. Like, what is that spark inside of you that is worthy, that wants to do this? And a lot of times we ignore that as women. We think we're supposed to be, you know, good and quiet and do the right thing. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the women that I've had calls with to explore Bali, them saying, well, I want to be responsible. So we have kind of this embedded in us as women that we're supposed to be the responsible ones in society. And my question for you is like, what does that even mean? Isn't it responsible for you to first and foremost take care of yourself? So you can rev your radiance and really tap into that sense of self-worth within yourself a few different ways. For me, I love to like kind of write glowing letters to myself. As you can tell, I like to write. I like to say, you know, Jess, this is why you deserve this. You've worked hard. You have been there for other people. Like, what are all those things on your list that you've done for others that now it's time for you? So by doing that, by writing that out, maybe dancing a little, getting into your body, like what are those things that rev your radiance and light your inner fire? Okay. So that is my third tip. So as you can tell, like we're kind of building up to this bliss trip, right? There's a few different steps before you actually take the leap. And the next one, speaking of taking the leap, number 4 is to actually make this a reality. So many times in our lives, we have these ideas in our head of like, oh, I really want to go here. Or I want to go to Hawaii, or I want to go to Africa, or I want to go to Peru, or I want to go to Bali. But it's all up here. And we know it's here. But how can we actually make this extra step and actually make it a reality, right? And that's where the doer in us comes in. So when you rev your radiance, that's really what gets you to take that next step and feel fired up enough that, yes, I am worthy. Yes, I can make this happen. So how do you make it a reality? First of all, you gotta let go of you. I'm checking my notes right now because I wrote this down. Know before you go. How many times have we heard that, right? No, you must know before you go. Screw it. It's a crock of bullshit. Okay? Bliss trips. Some of my most amazing bliss trips have been actually when I am completely not knowing exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just leaving it up and trusting. And that whole part about knowing before you go and having to have all the details, that's where we get stuck again in our minds and we start to be all rational, and then we make up excuses, and then guess what happens? We don't actually come from here and we don't make it happen for ourselves, because in our minds, we're trying to be responsible. Well, we don't have all the things planned. And what about, the time off work? And what about, somebody to watch my kids or my dogs, or what's my husband going to think? And I'm not saying not to have a conversation with your husband, by the way. So one thing that I should say is that if you want to know how to really get your guy on board, I'm actually doing a webinar with Harnick next Saturday. So I believe it is the 3rd. Let me check the date really quick so I don't give you guys the wrong date. No, it's the 4th. So Saturday the 4th at 10 a.m. No, not 10 a.m. I'm trying to think. Noon Pacific time. Sorry. Okay. So Saturday the 4th, noon Pacific time. Make sure to check back either on my Facebook page, or if you're on my email list and you're watching this, make sure to sign up for that webinar, because that's going to be awesome. If you're wondering, like, how do I get my guy on board to take a big trip like to Bali? I know that's been like a really soft spot for some of the women that I've spoken to about Bali on the phone, is that their husbands are not necessarily on board. So of course I can support you in that if we jump on the phone and you're feeling like Bali is for you. But I think it's really cool to hear from a man. So I'm totally stoked that my sweetie is getting on a webinar with me to give you guys some awesome tips. Okay, so moving on. So how do you make it make this bliss trip a reality? So some of my tips, I'm going to get into a little bit more of like specific tips for you right now. So we focused a lot on the emotions, right? We focused on releasing, we focused on getting in touch with what do we want, need, and desire, and really revving up our fire. Now it's time to actually do and make it happen. So in order to make it happen, my biggest tip for you is, again, screw the know before you go and just buy your freaking plane ticket. Just do it. Because what happens when you do that? There's really no going back, right? I mean, there is if you buy a ticket that's refundable, yes. But many times when we actually make that step and just buy that plane ticket, we're going to make it happen, right? And there's always a way to make something happen if you really want it. Okay, let me say that again, because I truly believe this. We talk ourselves out of it, but there is always a way to make something happen if you believe that you want, need, desire, and deserve it. Okay. So a couple of my tips for actually purchasing your ticket. I like to use kayak.com. If you guys have never used that, it's just how a kayak is spelled, KAYAK.com. The reason why I love this site is because it does comparison of different fares and different schedules. So for my Bali trip, I used Kayak and found a really sweet deal, under $1,000 to actually go to Bali from Las Vegas, which is just totally crazy. I spent $2,400 to go to Peru last year. So pretty sweet. If you do your research, don't just go to the airline's website and purchase that ticket right away. Do some research. And the reason why this is a great tip for taking a Bliss trip is because oftentimes that's one of the main things that holds us back is the cost of a plane ticket. So my advice to you is to try to find a really great deal on a plane ticket. And then what you can do with the leftover money that you have is you can invest in what are those juicy things that you want to do while you're on this Bliss trip, and indulge. And that's one of my my tips, actually, number 11 that we'll get to. Okay, so moving on. Number 5, get a room with a view. So we're talking about where are you going to stay, right? Now you've got this plane ticket. Where are you going to stay? And my biggest tip for this is don't settle on your room. Okay, plane ticket's one thing. Like, try to find the best value that you can out of a plane ticket. But when it comes to where you are staying, splurge on that a little bit. Like, what is going to feel good to you? Do you want a room with a view? You know, like, do you want a really cushy bed? Like, what's important to you? Do you want to stay somewhere close to the beach if you're going somewhere with a beach? For me, that was really important. So I'm actually going to share my screen with you again so that you can see when I was in Hawaii. When I was in Hawaii, I went for this balcony beachside room. So this Bliss trip to Hawaii was my first trip that I ever took by myself. So that's another thing when you're deciding of, you know, what do I want to do on this Bliss trip? What does this trip look like? It's to ask yourself, do I want to go by myself? I can tell you that this Bliss trip was so freaking empowering and amazing to go by myself. It was one of those things that I was terrified to do because I like to run in pairs. I'm very like communal person, but I'm also pretty independent. And I would say even if you're not independent, step out of your comfort zone, right? Just like Jennifer was saying in the chat box, is getting out of your comfort zone. And the best part about going on a Bliss trip by yourself is you don't have to talk to anybody about plans. It's literally, what do you want to do? What do you want to do every single moment? So splurge a little bit on where you want to stay. Write this website down, Airbnb, like bed and breakfast, but bnb.com. This site, you guys, has changed my life.